Okay, so we are going to start with a webinar. Thank you, everybody who is joining us. We're trying to wait for more folks, but I think that we can start. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Yeah, well, today you can see actually in the chat information about interpretation, and I think we have a slide about that as well. Thank you so much. So, tiene una imagen aquí para manejar la interpretación y hay instrucciones en el chat. Y díganos si tiene preguntas, por favor, o si tiene problemas. All right, well, thank you, everybody. I'm going to start in English. And welcome. My name is Fabiola. I am a part of the Food Chain Workers Alliance team. And we are, if you don't know, we are a member-based alliance binational that supports the work of our member organizations who are organizing with food workers on the ground in various sectors of the food chain, like restaurant, retail, processing, warehouse, street vendors, and farm work. And we are here today to celebrate the launch of the report about the Binational People's Tribunal on the struggles of farm workers in North America. This was a historic event that the FCWA Farm Workers Sector Committee organized in March of 2024. And we're going to talk about those organizations in a minute. But today you'll hear about a little bit about the contents of the report that is live now and that we invite you to read and share with your networks. And you will hear from our panelists as well, people who participated in the tribunal itself. And, this is not meant to be a summary of the tribunal sessions, but more to hear about their current work and how we can all support them. So we are very lucky to have, I think we have a slide of the presenters. We are very lucky to have here with us Patricia Lopez. Can we move the slide, please? I'm not sure if Elizabeth or Sonia, Suzanne, is handling the slideshow, but okay. So we're very lucky to have.
Hi, I'm sorry, I'm getting a slide not loading for our panelist.
No worries.
Our panelist slide. I'm so sorry about that, everybody.
No worries, no worries. I'll present them. We have with us Patricia Lopez from the Pioneer Valley Workers Center. We have Luis from Alianza Agrícola in New York. We have Taneeta Doma from Justice for Migrant Workers, Alfredo Juarez from C2C, and we'll hear also from Raj Patel, who is an ally and activist and author who participated as one of our jurors. So thank you, everybody, for being here, and welcome. So, before I pass it to the speakers, we want to start by giving you a bit of a summary of the takeaways of the tribunal itself and how it became a reality. So just for context, in 2019, our farm worker members throughout the US and Canada began to organize kind of organically to build a new collective platform for the grassroots farm worker movement. The members of this committee you're going to hear about them throughout, our hour today, but they are Alianza Agrícola, GATA, Community to Community, Familias Unidas por la Justicia, Farm Worker Association of Florida, Justice for Migrant Farm Workers, Migrant Justice, Pioneer Valley Workers Center, Rural Migrant and Ministry, Worker Center of Central New York, California Institute for Rural Studies, and the Workers Justice Center of New York. So these organizations, currently are working on critical issues in their localities, right? We're talking dairies in Vermont and in New York, greenhouses in Ontario, and other agricultural industries in Massachusetts, Florida, Pennsylvania, and the state of Washington. And they have come together as a group to organize for better working and living conditions for all farm workers. These groups made the decision to organize a people's tribunal as a participatory process where farm workers testified about their conditions that they face and to hold accountable those who are responsible and to educate others about the realities of the agricultural industry. But they also came together to co-create an alternative vision of farm worker justice. They did so because our current legal and political system has not and will not bring justice for exploited workers. And people's tribunals are justice forums established by social movements, communities, and organizations in order to tell the truth. And the Binational People's Tribunal on the struggles of farm workers in North America, it's part of a long tradition of people's tribunals organized by movements across the world to expose systems of oppression. So like we mentioned, this was a participatory grassroots effort led by these organizations that it took a year to become a reality. So a lot of work went into this. And as you can all see, we're showing you, thanks Elizabeth, showing you some aspects of the report and how you can read more about the things that we're sharing with you today. And, the testimonies that you'll read about are the result of focus groups, of interviews, conversations, meetings, surveys, that were organized and led mostly by food workers and organizers. And the tribunal itself was organized in 3 sessions, and the report follows this format as well. We have the session of health and safety, freedom of movement, and climate justice. And again, we invite you all to read more about them. During several hours of testimony in March of 2024, we heard from dozens of workers, both in person and virtually, sharing their own experiences and experiences from their coworkers. We heard things like, women being harassed in the workplace and in the housing provided by the employer, workers losing limbs during hazardous conditions, the constant threat of immigration enforcement, how guest workers are based on exploitation, how workers are forced to work under extreme climate conditions, whether it is heat stress, freezing temperatures, or forest fires. But we also heard about resisting these conditions, pushing back against employers and governmental agencies, and about the role that farm workers can and should play in the global movement for climate justice. We also had the participation of our incredible jurors, Max Ahil, Jerry Buhil, Shamtoli Huck, Raj Patel, and Rod Robinson, as well as participation from organizers from other parts of the food chain. They came to show support, also members of the Food Chain Workers Alliance, Mark Medina from Burgerville and Union, and Adi Alvarado from Warehouse Workers for Justice. So the testimonies and conversations that happened during this tribunal shed light to important key points, right? That again, you can read more about in the report, but just to name a few, that the existing legal and political structures will not bring us justice. That workers are the ones who know what a fair workplace looks like. That it is impossible to separate the abuses described in the testimonies from the violence that was fundamental to the establishment of the United States and Canada. The justice for women farm workers cannot be achieved without addressing eliminating systemic gender-based abuses, and that to achieve change, we have to center worker-led organization. And before I pass it to our amazing speakers, we just want to mention that we are launching the report today, partly because it is close to Thanksgiving in the US, no? A holiday that, as we all know, centers very much around food, that celebrates how food brings us together, but that obscures where food comes from and how it arrives to our tables. And a holiday that many food workers, especially farm workers, are not able to take off. And we're also doing this coming off the heels of the election in the United States. So we will hear from the panelists about their current work and how we can support them. Again, thank you for joining us, and we invite you to read the full report. But right now, I'm going to pass it to our amazing speakers. And we are going to start with Patricia from the Pioneer Valley Worker Center. Hi, Patricia. Patricia participated in the health and safety session along with Mayra from the Worker Center of Central New York, Yesenia from the Worker Justice Center of New York, Claudia, also from Pioneer Valley, Moylene from Justice for Migrant Workers, and virtual participations from workers from Vermont in Canada, and with the support of Julie from the Worker Justice Center. And again, this is not meant to be a summary of the session. So let me just say that the definition of health and safety is very broad, right? And the testimonies in this session shared about sexual harassment and violence towards women, dangerous living conditions of farm housing, and the effect it has on families and children, dangers of working in agriculture in general, and also the lack of accountability and support on behalf of the employers for when accidents and these kinds of violence happens. So I'm going to pass it on to Patricia now. Thank you.
Hola, buenas tardes, compañeros. Pues como dice, mi nombre es Patricia Lopez. Yo soy miembro líder de la organización Pioneer Valley Worker Center acá en Massachusetts. Pues yo estuve participando de panelista en el Tribunal de Salud y Seguridad porque me pareció muy importante que hayan personas que nos tomen en cuenta, nosotros los trabajadores agrícolas o las personas que trabajamos en altos riesgos para poner en sus mesas de muchas personas, de muchos americanos, sus verduras, sus frutas, leche fresca, como nosotros decimos, y muchas veces no toman en cuenta eso, y entonces pues, ¿cómo lo puedo decir? Me siento pues alegre que, como le voy a repetir, los tomaron en cuenta en esto para nosotros poder levantar nuestra voz y que escucharan muchos compañeros todo lo que nos pasa a nosotros los trabajadores del campo.
Gracias, Patricia. Queríamos también ver si nos puede compartir un poco en lo que están trabajando ustedes ahora, ¿verdad? ¿Cuáles son las prioridades de la organización ahora que vivimos pues en esta realidad política en el país?
Pues en este momento, pues con estas elecciones, pues todos los compañeros, todas las personas que somos inmigrantes, pues nos sentimos con miedo porque no sabemos qué es lo que irá a pasar. Primeramente, como madre, como padre, sentimos el miedo al abandono pues dicen muchas veces que se van a separar familias. Bueno, ahorita la organización está poniéndose en contacto con abogados para cualquier cosa. También están haciendo una línea de respuesta rápida por cualquier cosa, si pues nosotros en los trabajos los llegan a detener o en el transcurso que estamos viajando del trabajo a la casa, porque aquí últimamente han estado muchos rumores. Todavía no estamos muy seguros porque, como también yo digo, hay muchas personas que se dejan llevar por los rumores. Hasta ahorita no hemos visto nada, pero estamos con ese miedo. Pero gracias a Dios estamos también protegidos, sentimos un poco porque está la organización, y yo sé que hay muchas organizaciones también que se unen a protegernos a nosotros, porque como yo digo, nosotros no somos ningunos criminales. La gente piensa, o como dijo el presidente, son criminales que vienen a este país. Eso es mentira. Nosotros venimos a trabajar. Gracias a nosotros es que en sus mesas pueden haber demasiadas verduras, frutas, los productos que nosotros colectamos, y ellos no se ponen a pensar que nosotros no hemos venido a robarle a nadie acá.
Gracias, Patricia. Y por último, ¿nos puede decir cómo es que los aliados pueden ayudar al trabajo que están ustedes haciendo y cómo les gustaría a ustedes que de la manera en la que este reporte puede ayudar pues a avanzar las luchas que tienen?
Pues es muy importante, porque si los aliados ven que nosotros estamos hablando con nuestra verdad, no estamos diciendo cosas que no los están pasando, nosotros le decimos la verdad, lo que sufrimos, lo que los pasa. Yo siento que si los aliados están siempre con nosotros unidos, nosotros vamos a seguir avanzando. Como dice, pues si el pueblo está unido, pues podemos salir adelante. Y pues yo pido a las personas que vean el reporte, que vean que las cosas que están allí en el reporte son cosas que los están sucediendo día tras día. Como yo dije, no es solamente, yo pensaba, antes, quizás solo acá en mi estado sucede eso, y no, cuando yo los reunimos todas las organizaciones, veo que en todos los estados es lo mismo, es el mismo problema que se vive, el mismo acoso, el mismo robo de salario, discriminación. Entonces, y yo pienso que los aliados junto con nosotros podemos salir adelante, y como se dice, unidos jamás seremos vencidos.
Mil gracias, compañera, por su participación en el tribunal, en organizarlo y por estar aquí con nosotros ahora. Muchas gracias.
Gracias a ustedes.
Okay, I'm gonna switch to English now, if that's okay. So up next, we are going to hear from Luis Jimenez from Alianza Agrícola, who participated in the Freedom of Movement session, along with Gabriel from Justice for Migrant Workers, Juana from the Farm Workers Association of Florida, Juan from CATA, with the testimony read by Mario Chun, an organizer with Migrant Justice, and Alfredo Juarez from Community to Community, with the support of Taneeta and Chris, also from Justice for Migrant Workers. Before I pass it to Luis, just wanted to mention that, this session was called Freedom of Movement because it referred to, the lack of freedom that many farm workers have once they arrive to this country and to, other countries too, whether it is undocumented folks or folks under a guest program. So the speakers here talked about living and working within the 100-mile border, the U.S. racist immigration laws, like the one in Florida, a collaboration between police and immigration enforcement, and the ways in which guest programs, both in the U.S. and in Canada, exploit workers to benefit the industry and the countries. So I'm gonna pass it to Luis now so he can share a little more. Thank you.
Hola, buenos días, buenas tardes a todos. Pues mi nombre es Luis Jiménez. Yo soy uno de los fundadores, miembros y líderes de Alianza Agrícola aquí en el oeste de Nueva York. Y trabajo en el área de la agricultura, en el sector en la industria lechera. Y mi participación en el tribunal, bueno, fue algo que me motiva siempre a hablar de estas cosas, porque creo que como trabajadores agrícolas, inmigrantes, estamos expuestos a, a ser explotados, a ser discriminados, y también nuestro estatus migratorio siempre nos pone en peligro de una deportación. Creo que todos sabemos la lucha que hacemos día con día de salir a trabajar, de no tener la seguridad de regresar a nuestras casas, de que nuestros hijos, seamos separados de nuestros hijos. Como trabajadores, creo que tenemos el derecho a la libertad de movimiento. No debemos de sentir más miedo. Estamos trabajando, aportando a este país para que eh, siga creciendo. Es un país de inmigrantes donde debemos de sentirnos seguros. No nos sentimos seguros ya que estamos cerca de la frontera con Canadá y la patrulla fronteriza está muy cerca. Entonces, siempre se ha hablado de la patrulla fronteriza en la frontera sur. Nunca, porque estamos en Nueva York, a veces no se piensa que la patrulla fronteriza está cerca de nosotros, pero sí han pasado muchos casos, muchos incidentes de separación de familia y esto nunca se ha hablado por miedo. Y creo que eh, en este tribunal tuvimos la oportunidad de mencionar todo eso, qué son los casos que han pasado y qué son las dificultades que enfrentamos como trabajador agrícola. A veces es tan fácil que un trabajador agrícola sea detenido por la policía local por no tener una identificación o no eh, hablar inglés con el pretexto de interpretación. La policía llama a la migra y termina esto en detención y en deportación, ¿no? En separación de familia. Entonces creo que hay que ser conscientes de que qué es la realidad. Hay que ser conscientes de que como trabajadores agrícolas solamente queremos trabajar libremente, estar seguros y no vivir con este miedo, ¿no? La policía local es una fuerza que nos debe cuidar a la comunidad. Queremos sentirnos parte de esta comunidad que aportamos tanto, pero siempre existe el miedo. Entonces, creo que alzando nuestra voz y contando cuáles son las realidades que pasan, queremos concientizar a la gente, queremos concientizar a todos que eh, tenemos derechos. Como seres humanos debemos de tener el derecho de la libertad de movimiento. No queremos sentir más miedo, no queremos que sigan estos casos de separación de familia. Y también este, este tribunal para mí es muy importante porque creo que hablando de todos estos temas, eh, se llega a muchas voces y queremos que esto sea una herramienta, que sea una guía para poder continuar alzando la voz de la comunidad inmigrante, de los trabajadores, y que sea utilizado como la base del cambio, ¿no? De cambiar la concientización de la gente, que si los aliados creen en la justicia social y que nosotros como inmigrantes aportamos mucho a este país, que nos merecemos también estar seguros aquí. Creo que con esta administración que viene, eh, hay mucha incertidumbre en nuestra comunidad, ha aumentado mucho la preocupación, el miedo siempre ha existido y creo que ahora va a aumentar más. Entonces, es el momento de unirnos todos como trabajadores, como aliados que quieren estar en solidaridad con nosotros, ah, que estén dispuestos a apoyarnos, que estén dispuestos a alzar la voz por la comunidad inmigrante. Eh, Creo que todos estamos en, en el mismo objetivo de seguir luchando y de permanecer seguros aquí. No somos criminales, como dijo la compañera, somos trabajadores, venimos aquí por una razón y también estamos levantando este país. Creo que este país sin la mano eh, de inmigrantes eh, no sería lo mismo. Creo que nadie quiere pagar más por la comida. Creo que todos queremos sentirnos parte de esta sociedad. Eh, entonces, pues creo que es el trabajo que tenemos de aquí en adelante, ¿no? Y me cuento yo también porque también quiero sentirme parte de esta comunidad que he hecho bastante y que también me gustaría seguir trabajando para poder cambiar las cosas. Gracias.
Muchas gracias, compañero. Y gracias también por todo lo que Alianza hizo, no solo para participar en este tribunal, pero en la organización y en recolectar todos esos testimonios que fueron fueron bien importantes. Solo quería mencionar, antes de pasar solo a la siguiente presentadora, que quisiera nada más nombrar que vemos en el chat a muchos compas que participaron en en el tribunal, compartiendo sus historias y viajando a la ciudad de Nueva York, donde pasó. Los vemos en el chat, entonces gracias por acompañarnos. Sabemos que muchos están acompañándonos aquí durante su día libre, o a lo mejor están en el trabajo, y muchos otros que no pudieron venir, pues les mandamos nuestra apreciación también, ¿verdad? Okay, I'm gonna switch to English now. Next up, we have Taneeta Doma, who is with Justice for Migrant Workers. Taneeta actually supported the health and safety session, but she agreed to join us here to share more about the climate justice session since our comrade Moylene Samuels was not able to join us today. But Taneeta's here, so thank you so much. And, you know, the testimonies in this session were presented by Moylene from Justice for Migrant Workers, Enrique from Migrant Justice, Ivan from the Farmworkers Association of Florida, Ismael from Alianza Agrícola, with support from our friend Nessa from National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition, and Edgar from Familias Unidas por la Justicia. And, you know, these testimonies in this session shared accounts of, you know, working in extreme temperatures with little to no protection, again, including high and freezing temperatures and having to work during the recent forest fires. They also share really powerful stories about being displaced from, you know, from our home countries due to the oil and other extractive industries. So I'm going to pass it right now to Taneeta so they can, they can share more with us about that. Thank you.
Everyone, good morning and good afternoon. My name is Taneeta, and I'm going to be speaking not just on my own behalf, but on behalf of Moylene, who did share some remarks that she'd wanted to share to you personally, but unfortunately wasn't able to. And also to acknowledge the many injured workers from Injured Workers Action for Justice who are joining us today from Canada. The reason Justicia was able to participate in the tribunal was unfortunately not in person, as many workers are not able to cross the border, but because workers shared their testimony both online and with us, so we could bring them to the tribunal. And we believe that it was really important for a Canadian group like Justicia to participate, to show that there's so many similarities regardless of the borders that separate us, that workers are going through. And the issues that are happening in the US very much extend into Canada as well and have an impact on Canada even after the election or before. And so there are lots of opportunities to think about it more optimistically, to organize across the food chain and across borders. And we're really honored that we were able to participate in the tribunal and hear from workers in Canada and from workers in the US who are organizing and struggling together. So that's why we wanted to participate. From Moylene, I just wanted to share, she believed that the tribunal was a really great initiative, and it was an indictment of the entire system, and important for workers to hold decision makers accountable, because obviously we all know there are laws and policies that are in place that do nothing to protect workers, and workers need to be heard from directly about what needs to change. The same injustices exist in Canada and the US. Farm workers are underpaid, overworked. They're not treated like workers. They're not treated like humans. And so whether workers are undocumented or guest workers, we all need to stand together and fight against divisions that are created by employers and by governments that we all know. Some of the fights that we're seeing in Canada are very similar to those in the US. There's a huge anti-immigrant sentiment happening now. Many people may have heard that Canada is limiting permanent residents or green card holders in Canada over the next 3 years. I know there's a lot of white Americans who are very concerned about that being the result of the American election, but it's something that was very much in the works for many months now. And the federal government is basically trying to further limit the ability of temporary workers to become permanent residents, while also expanding temporary resident programs so that people are continuing to struggle under closed work permits and not having access to any permanent status or any type of status where they're able to live with dignity and with respect. And employers are continuing to exploit that for their own benefits. They're continuing to divide and rule workers of different nationalities, different immigration statuses. The agricultural lobby is very powerful and instrumental in this, in limiting health and safety protections and eliminating them when they exist. And of course, there's lots of myths about immigration and the agricultural industry that are continuing. And so when we're doing the work that we're doing, just in terms of thinking about climate justice, what stood out to us from this panel is how many workers talked about the histories of their communities back home and how they brought the knowledges and the understandings that they have from back home to work here in Canada and the US, and the importance of that in terms of sustainability and the ways that they treat the land, and how that's been completely disrespected and denied in the work that's done here. And so climate justice was really shown in the panel to be central to farm worker organizing, because it's also about bringing back, honoring the history and our ancestors who were farmers and who brought their skills and their knowledge and passed them on, and also organizing workers together based on that and to move forward based on that as well. And so for us, the report, it highlights a lot of the different key issues that workers brought up, and also centers workers so that workers who don't often want to talk about what's happened, the trauma that's happened, don't have to constantly be the ones to share, that this report can speak for that as well, for workers that don't feel comfortable to constantly have to deal with the trauma of talking about what's happened. Sorry, I just got a phone call. And also to share with allies so that they can read and learn about what workers have been going through, and to continue to fight with us and move forward together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Taneeta. Thank you for, bringing not just here, but to the tribunal itself, the perspective from our brothers and sisters in Canada. And also thank you to all the Canadian workers that teach us how this fight and solidarity in reality has no borders. So up next, we are going to hear from Raj Patel, who served as one of the jurors and unfortunately was not able to make it today, but he was kind enough to send a message, for us. And just to say that, the role of the jurors was to listen, to ask questions, and to make connections with their own work that we invite you all to also look up, and the work the farm workers are doing. So again, thank you to them and to Raj for sending this message. So let's see.
Hi there. My name is Raj Patel, and together with Rob Robinson, Jomtoli Huck, Max Isle, and Jarabu Hill, I was honored to be part of the jury of the first binational tribunal on farm workers' struggles in North America. Now, the tribunal itself covered the sorts of areas you might expect, things like health and safety and freedom of movement. We're talking about the kinds of arcane rules that capitalists in both sides of the border have conspired to develop hand in glove with the state in order maximally to be able to exploit farm workers. But we also talked about other things. We talked about things like climate change. And at some level, you might think, well, yeah, that's a practical matter. I mean, who is it that's going to be most exposed to extreme weather but the farm workers in the fields providing the food that feeds everyone while everyone else is indoors, surviving extreme heat or flood? But actually, the arc of the discussion was an arc that wasn't just about managing the exigencies of survival under climate change and late capitalism, but was actually about hearing farm workers' theorizations and deep understandings of what needs to change. And particularly now, as we find ourselves in this dark hour confronted with a Trump presidency in which the 47th president of the United States has promised that he will declare a national emergency and deploy the military to conduct forced deportations in a theater of cruelty that has, sadly, some parallel in American history, but none within living memory. These kinds of horrors need to be fought against. And in the vanguard of that fight, leading and demanding our solidarity, are the farm workers who are absolutely at the front line and who have wonderful ideas about what exactly needs to happen. It is our duty to defend their rights and their freedoms and their theory to be able to fight and transform the food system to something that helps us not just survive fascism, but build the foundations for the kind of economy and just society that we need to see after fascism. So I'm going to stop talking and hand over to precisely those voices, but thank you so much for joining us today.
All right, so thank you again to Raj for sending that video. And, just I think one of the things that Raj is reminding us of is that this space was to kind of hear about the harsh realities and horrors of the agricultural industry, but also to show the power that farm workers have and also the responsibility that we as non-farm workers have in this fight too. So with that in mind, we're gonna pass it to Alfredo from Community to Community right now, who's going to tell us about the vision for the future, or what farm workers articulated in this space is the vision for liberation. So I'm gonna pass it to Alfredo now. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Alfredo, also known as Lelo. I'm a organizer with Community to Community and a also a member / founder of Familias Unidas por la Justicia, a farm worker union here in Washington State. I just want to say that I was very excited to be part of this tribunal in New York. I know it's something that we C2C and FEJ organize here in our state every year. We got our next one is January 21st. So in just a couple of weeks, we got our next tribunal. Last week we held a farm worker assembly. We called it the farm worker sitting the future, and it's similar to the tribunal, but we did it locally here with the farm workers here. And that's a step, the tribunal's next step to this. So we talked about a couple of issues and also some ideas and solutions that we'll be taking to our tribunal for this upcoming session in Olympia. But I just want to start off with a little overview of what happened in New York, which is the day before testimonies were shared. All tribunal participants met in a closed session to envision a just future for farm workers. Workers and organizers created or expressing their vision and presented their work to the group. This was followed by a group discussion to find commonality, differences, and strengths, and identify needs and plans for the future. A powerful picture of farm worker justice and liberation emerged, in which Food and agriculture systems break the chain of capitalism and or center around communities and cooperations. Families are together and happy. There is no more ice and there are no more borders, walls. Immigrants, workers are not living in fears. Instead, they are welcome. Farm workers don't have their health and lifespan robbed by work. They are not poisoned by pesticides and other chemicals, and there is access to free healthcare for all. In communities where farm workers live, children have access to school and adults have access to support center to file claims, get trainings, and build political power. Community are not polluted by agrobusinesses, but are a healthy place to play, work, and rest in peace. Community agroecology, farms, and co-ops abound where people work for life and earth instead of for profit for the few. Instead of selling labors to a boss, workers share ownership of land and production. Our environment is protected and workers are protected from the impacts of climate change and climate disasters. Farm workers unite with other food workers to create, share, demand, and negotiate collective agreement. Farm workers have ample water, rest and shades, safe conditions, and housing, overtime pay after 40 hours a week, and living wages. Yeah, that's all I have.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Alfredo. And yes, as you can, not sure if you can hear me. Yes, you can hear me. And as you can see in this slideshow, you can read more about that vision that was, articulated in this space, but it has been sort of been building up in these collective spaces for a while now. And also you can see the art the farm workers created to represent that vision. And, also thank you to Lilo for informing us about what you all are doing locally. So, before we kind of bring to a close, we want to open it to questions or comments or, shows of appreciation and love or whatever folks feel to share in the chat. We don't have much time, but we know that in the webinar format, it's a little limiting in how we can interact. But if somebody has anything to say or to share in the chat of all the participants, we have, it looks like 80 folks in the room. So thank you so much for joining us. And if you want to ask a question, make a comment, please do so. And maybe we can wait for that. If not, we can move on. Okay, so we can move on. It's good. So, we want to give our thanks and appreciation to all the farm workers who share their personal experience, and the organizers who collected these powerful stories. Thank you so much to the FCWA Farm Worker Committee. All these organizations are amazing organizations that worked in, making this a reality. We want to thank our jurors, our facilitators, our interpreters on the ground, our volunteers who jump in to do interpretation and facilitation without, much notice. Folks that translated the testimonies into Spanish, into English, and also to the People's Forum in New York City, which was the place where the tribunal happened. And, also thank you to the person, Pilar, who worked on the art. I think I can see in the chat that there was a lot of like interest in the beautiful art that she created. and also the person, everybody who helped with the design of the report. Special thanks to Elizabeth, Sonia, and Suzanne for producing this report, and the rest of the Food Chain Workers Alliance staff for all the support. And yeah, let me see if there's anything here. Just shows of appreciation and love to everyone involved and the farm workers across North America. Thank you, Andrew. Powerful vision for Alfredo from Rachel. Thank you. And also, we want to thank, of course, the Well Seeds Fund for making this a reality. And yeah, thank you, everybody. Please remember to read and share the report. It's live now, and to support all these amazing organizations and the work that they're doing now and the fight ahead. Thank you.